Hello everyone, I'm Leanne Young. I'm joining you virtually because I'm in Quito, Ecuador today, but I look forward to connecting with you Sunday afternoon or Monday if you're still at the conference and would like to connect. The next point that we'd like to make about standards-based learning and grading is that we classify performance and learning according to criteria rather than calculate a proportion of items correct. We do this because percentage of items correct is really not a defensible way to summarize learning. When we think about percentages and the flaws of percentage-based grading, a lot of times people say, well, but this feels familiar and it's more precise. But we have to think about what we're being precise about. Precisely calculating a percentage of items correct is not the same as being able to say how much or to what extent a student has learned something. A story I always like to tell when thinking about percentage grades relates back to the purpose. Why are we grading to begin with? And really the primary purpose of grading is not just to communicate accurately, but it's to inform our instruction. And I can remember years ago, my son Spencer, who's now in college, he failed the end of course exam for algebra, and he was just devastated. We were all very confused because he's a math and science guy. He's really good at math and science, and we were confused how this could have happened. And so, but all we knew was percentage of items correct. He got fewer items correct than led to a 70%. And so he thus failed the exam. By the way, the policy then, the instructional policy was if you fail the end of course exam, what happens? You repeat the course because, you know, we should do more of what didn't work the first time. So clearly this is not the best instructional decision, the most sound decision. And if the purpose of the grading is to inform our instruction, we need grades that can provide some sort of diagnostic ability for us to understand what went well, what didn't go well. By the way, as we examined Spencer's test and figured out what went well and what didn't go well, he only made one kind of error on the whole test. He was mixing up positive and negative signs, and so his answers were often incorrect. But if we had approached this in a standards-based way, rather than a percentage-based way, we would have seen that he chose the right operation every single time. He executed the operation correctly every single time. He made this one kind of error, which often we call these careless errors in math. I'm not sure why we call them careless errors. He did care, so it wasn't careless, but nonetheless, it was errors of accuracy. And if we had instead given multiple grades and classified his performance according to criteria, we would have had information that we could have used to make sound instructional decisions rather than just turning our brains off, calculating items correct, saying you repeat the course. So percentages of items correct is just not a defensible way to summarize learning or performance. How many items a student got right or wrong is not so important. What really matters is what knowledge, what skills, what processes were demonstrated so we can respond with the appropriate flexible grouping strategies or intervention strategies or supports or accommodations or modifications so that the student can take the next step and increase their knowledge and skills. So in a standards-based environment, and this I'm not suggesting is an exemplary scale, it's simply an exemplar. And in a standards-based grading environment, we have multiple categories in order. This is called an ordinal scale of measurement. There may be 3 categories, 4 categories, 5 categories, but there are categories in order from lowest to highest. We need to have enough categories to make distinctions between the levels of performance that we need in order to make instructional decisions. So 2 categories may not be enough, but 8 or 10 categories, and certainly 101, is too many. There are not 101 different things that we'll do in response to how a student performed on a single assessment. So we just need to decide how many categories do we need in order order to make the distinctions we need to make, not just for the purpose of communicating, but for the purpose of informing our instruction. And even we might think, well, what about at the end of the year? We still need to inform our instruction. We still need to know what to do from that point forward. We want to be careful about the words we choose for these categories as we're determining how we classify performance. And I'll give you an example. Some schools use categories like this, especially in early childhood: no progress, progressing, and mastered. But if we think about it and we think about the distribution of performance across these categories, this is how it ends up looking. Almost nobody has mastered it at the beginning, and almost nobody's making no progress. Almost everything fits into the category of progressing. And when we have labels like this and we haven't really examined how those labels apply to any given tasks via rubrics, we may end up having difficulty distinguishing between those students who are progressing really well and getting close to mastery and those students who are making some progress, but maybe we're concerned about or we feel need additional support. We would make different instructional decisions for those two categories, and so we want to make sure that we have the categories to do this. Sometimes it feels like we may do this in early childhood. I have an early childhood background, so I can own this. We often give happy grades. Everybody's progressing, and it's just fine to be progressing at high levels or progressing and being a bit behind. But it is important that to make instructional decisions, especially within hopefully an MTSS model or an RTII model, that we are making decisions, making distinctions that help us make instructional decisions. But we can see that even though the scale on the right feels more precise, it feels more objective, what are we really measuring? Percentage of items correct. That's just not a proxy for what a student has learned and what skills have been mastered and what skills still need some support. And hopefully Spencer's example will help you explain that to other people. Another key component of making a move to standards-based learning and grading is that every faculty member in the building must have an orientation to mastery. What does that mean? Well, this is my best non-example photograph for a non-example of orientation to mastery. How many of you had someone like this in your teacher preparation courses or in other college courses where perhaps the professor led the semester off by saying, none of you will earn an A. Half of you will fail. You will be lucky to earn a C in this course. You know, this guy's probably not a bad guy, but somewhere along the way he got it crossed. He got his wires crossed on this one, and he began to interpret, I'm a good teacher if I'm a hard teacher. I'm a good teacher if not many students got there. Somehow he began to believe that. And that's a big part of what has to be undone in order to make a successful move to standards-based learning and grading. We have to stop thinking about how do we distinguish the few who get there and instead really value every student getting there, including those students who struggle because of disability or other reasons. We want to really value everybody getting there. The most effective teachers expect and want all students to get there and see it as their job to get all students there, whether they're having a struggle that's academic or a struggle that's behavioral. They see it as their job to really pull out all the stops to get students there, to get every student there, especially on the most critical skills. This orientation means that we must offer multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. If a student doesn't do well early in the year, early in the course, or early in a unit, it means we find other opportunities for that student to show what they know and show what they've learned. If the score is in any way included in the final grade, It's not a formative opportunity. And we want students to have multiple formative opportunities so that when it gets to be the summative point in time, they've had many opportunities to learn and grow and get there. I hear a lot of school faculty talk about these are our formative assessments and these are our summative assessments, and this is what a formative assessment looks like and this is what a summative assessment looks like. And it might be useful that instead of thinking about these are the formative ones and these are the summative ones and putting them in boxes like this, instead think about periods of time. Everything during the entire course, whether it's a year-long course or a semester-long course or a shorter course, is formative. Everything during that time is formative. Students should have multiple opportunities to show what they know over that period of time, and at the very end, then we arrive at the summative point in time. To not acknowledge this and allow students to have multiple opportunities over time and always acknowledge where a student is currently rather than averaging or in some way counting the grades that happened all along the way during the formative point in time, formative period in time. To do that is to say, I don't care if my teaching had any impact on your learning. And surely we care that our teaching had an impact on student learning. And so we want to offer multiple opportunities to show the effectiveness of our teaching and to show and acknowledge how students grow. Another way to think about this is like a GPS. So you may have needed a GPS to get around town this weekend, and I require one just to get around my own town sometimes. And we can think about it this way. Your GPS knows your destination. It knows where you're going because you've told it. It then tells you where you are right now. It does not average where you've been the past few hours because that would not be useful information. It tells you where you are right now. And then most importantly, your GPS gives you turn-by-turn directions for how to get there. So when we think about standards, grades, and feedback in our classrooms, the destination is the learning target or the standard. It's where we're going. The only thing that a grade or a score can accomplish is to tell a student where he or she is right now. And that's really the only useful information. Averaging or combining over time is not useful. We need to be able to classify performance according to a standard and tell where a student is right now. The most important thing that we do is give feedback, turn-by-turn directions on what a student needs to do next. The GPS does this, tells you where you are right now, and the GPS within our classrooms should tell students where they are right now. This is my contact information. I have a session Monday morning. I'd love to see some of you there and would love to connect with you on any of these standards-based grading and learning topics.